So, ok. Buongiorno a tutti. Katharina mi stava dicendo che... Ok, aspettiamo che... Yeah, put it on. Ok. Do you hear anything? Ok. Katharina mi stava dicendo che... non si sente? Let me see if it's channel 1, yeah? Due. No? Can you...
Now. Oh, yes, I can.
Katharina mi stava dicendo mentre vedevamo... Yeah. Mi stava dicendo mentre vedevamo le immagini dei film di Stanley, per esempio adesso in Eyes Wide Shut, mi stava dicendo, ah vedi, quelle sedie sullo sfondo sono le sedie di casa mia e il divano dove sta seduta la figlia di Kidman e Cruise è il divano di casa nostra. E vedi quel quadro lì con il gatto sulla destra? Quello è mio, fatto io. E quegli altri invece sulla sinistra sono di Christiane, mia madre. Ok, questo per dire che stiamo per parlare di quello che io, insieme a molti altri, reputo il più grande regista di tutti i tempi, e che però, diversamente da quello che forse le nuove generazioni possono credere, ma purtroppo anche forse quelle del passato, faceva cinema non come possiamo pensare, nel senso che il cinema di Stanley Kubrick era un cinema che potremmo definire di artigianato di lusso. Katharina, anche se era molto giovane all'epoca di 2001 Odissea nello spazio, che è uno dei motivi per cui è qua, visto che è il cinquantennale del film, tiene sempre molto a dire che 2001 era un film artigianale, molto artigianale. Non so se qualcuno di voi qui sa che infatti Stanley aveva chiamato ad affiancare Douglas Trumbull, il supervisore degli effetti speciali di 2001 nello spazio, forse il più artigianale dei nostri registi italiani, Antonio Margheriti, altrimenti detto Anthony M. Dawson, dopo aver visto un suo film che si chiamava L'arciere delle mille notte, Margheriti era stato chiamato da Stanley e Stanley gli aveva chiesto di affiancare Douglas Trumbull nella realizzazione degli effetti speciali di 2001 Odissea nello spazio, ma Antonio Margheriti disse di no, per vari motivi che adesso non c'è tempo di dire. Altra piccola introduzione. Katharina è qui perché Stanley ha fatto uno dei più importanti film noir di tutti i tempi, di cui avete visto un estratto verso l'inizio, che appunto è Rapina a mano armata. Ma c'è un altro motivo molto importante, e cioè che Katharina, KK, Kate, a sua volta ha lavorato in molti dei film di Kubrick, o come location manager o nell'art department, ma anche in altri film. Per esempio avete visto all'inizio Midnight Express, Fuga di mezzanotte. Noi tenteremo di capire da lei, facciamole delle domande, insomma cercheremo di capire qual è stato il suo lavoro, sia con Stanley per capire come Stanley lavorava, soprattutto da questo punto di vista secondo me è molto importante, interessante ragionare, cioè dal punto di vista proprio dell'artigianato. Io l'ho sempre chiamato casa e bottega, non so se Katharina è d'accordo, cioè Kubrick aveva trasformato le sue stalle nelle sale Avid o nelle sale di montaggio prima, perché in Avid aveva cominciato a lavorare solo con Eyes Wide Shut. Il primo film che ha fatto Katharina, se non sbaglio, è del 1977 ed era un film di James Bond, e la prima domanda che le vorrei fare è che cosa hai fatto per questo film di James Bond, che è stato, se non sbaglio, il tuo primo, diciamo, la tua prima esperienza su un set, prima di lavorare poi con tuo padre?
Okay, is this working? Yes? Buongiorno. I love Milan. It's very sunny and beautiful. Okay, so I actually worked on Barry Lyndon as a location photographer when I was 19. And it was working with Ken Adam on that film and seeing how the art department works that made me decide that that was the work I wanted to do. So then later in 1976, I got a job working on The Spy Who Loved Me with Ken Adam, who didn't really want to give me the job because I was a girl, and girls didn't work in the art department. But I was the lowest of the low of the low of the low in this art department. But because I had been to art school and they knew I could draw, I was given a chance. So first I was a girl, then I was Stanley Kubrick's daughter. So I had to work really hard not to make any mistakes. But I had a good time. I worked on that job for a year, and I was given fun jobs. And one of the jobs I was given was to make some metal teeth for Jaws, my claim to fame. So I did some drawings and I did some designs, and they made these teeth. And so, yeah, fame.
Adesso entreremo un po' nel dettaglio dei film che hai fatto con Stanley, ma tu appunto hai lavorato anche per Midnight Express, Fuga di mezzanotte, a parte i film di Stanley, Supergirl, poi hai lavorato anche per Dark Crystal, a parte i film, insomma, i film che non erano di Stanley. Quello che volevo chiederti è questo: Stanley non ha utilizzato solo te della sua famiglia nei suoi film. Nei suoi film ha lavorato anche molto Christiane, tua madre, anche Vivian, anche Manuel Arlan, se non sbaglio, il nipote, Jan Arlan come produttore esecutivo, eccetera, eccetera. Appunto, quindi forse casa e bottega evidentemente è un termine giusto. Perché credi che Stanley coinvolgesse tutti voi nelle lavorazioni di film che possono sembrare agli occhi degli inesperti film hollywoodiani, quindi industriali, e invece appunto erano molto artigianali? Perché pensi che coinvolgesse voi? Al di là delle vostre ovviamente insomma, riconosciute doti, ma non è normale, no? Che un regista insomma, usi la famiglia, si circondi della famiglia per fare film che poi entreranno nella storia del cinema.
Well, why wouldn't he? We're free, and he could, and there was trust and love there. So we were a family business, really, and so Christiane, he saw on television when he went to Germany to make Paths of Glory, and he wanted a more lyrical ending for a very tough film. And he saw her on television and interviewed her, and the rest is history. As far as Jan's involvement is, Jan was actually working in Switzerland for a different company, not in film business at all, and originally was recruited to help with research for Napoleon in the early days. But they liked each other, and Jan, my uncle, my mum's brother, moved to England, and they got on, and they started working together, and they were a very good sort of collaboration, really. And Manuel Harlan, Jans Harlan's eldest son, is a photographer, and he started working on Full Metal Jacket, I think, as a video operator. And then he went on to doing photographer, and he's actually a very well-known theatre photographer in London now. And he was the stills photographer on Eyes Wide Shut. And me, I was taught how to take photographs when I was 16. Stanley was a very good teacher, and I was very artistic, which is good because I can't do mathematics. And so he taught me how to use a camera. So then when we moved to Ireland on Barry Lyndon, I was 19, and the whole family moved to Ireland, and my younger sisters, and he said, well, there's no way that you, 19-year-old, are staying home alone, so you're coming with us. And now he had a 19-year-old with nothing to do, so I was put to work, and I went looking for locations for that film, and I did that for a year. And so we all got involved. We were like a circus family.
Ok. Tu all'epoca di 2001 Odissea nello spazio eri molto giovane e quindi insomma è abbastanza impossibile che tu abbia ricordi molto precisi del set. Però hai dei ricordi abbastanza precisi di quello che succedeva a casa riguardo 2001 Odissea nello spazio, nel senso che anche 2001 Odissea nello spazio è un film molto artigianale. Può sembrare assurdo, perché è il film che ha rifondato la fantascienza, come tutti voi sapete, e ha creato un nuovo immaginario di fantascienza. Ci racconti un po' che cosa significa, in che senso è stato un film artigianale 2001 Odissea nello spazio? Che atmosfera c'era insomma, in quel periodo, in quei mesi in cui Stanley lavorava al film, che ti aveva colpito?
Okay, so Stanley read Arthur C. Clarke's film and The Sentinel, and he loved this story and he wanted to make a science fiction story. And up until that point, science fiction really was in the B-movie genre. It was all bug-eyed monsters and not taken terribly seriously. And he wanted to make a serious philosophical film, the story about the condition of humankind from the very beginning. So we started in New York. He started in New York and was getting scientific advisors in Arthur C. Clarke. That was 1964. Then we moved to the UK and started pre-production, and he had lots of advisors and all the best scientific knowledge that was available at the time. And he started making his film at MGM Studios in Boreham Wood. And what I can tell you is that because nobody had made a film like this before, there was no computer, there was no CGI. This was a handmade film with models and glue and string and paint and a team of people who had been given totally free range to say, let's see what we can do. There are no wrong answers. Let's experiment. So it was like a big art school project with everybody getting very excited, doing things for the first time and doing things that had never been done before. Because if you said to Stanley, that's not possible, well, he says who? Who says it's not possible? Let's try it. He was very free-flowing. He was very experimental. And of course, he got the best people who had great imagination, and they experimented and they tried and they filmed it. So how many people here have seen 2001? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. So, you know the Stargate sequence, it's now called the Stargate sequence. That is not CGI, that's not computers. That's Doug Trumbull and various other people and Stanley in a room with a tank of water and paint and glue and dropping, and oh, that's pretty, and let's film that. And they would come home smelling from chemicals and excited, oh wow, you should see this, it's so wonderful. So they had a great time, and Doug Trumbull is still doing it, and he's still experimenting, and he's still using water and paint and glue and whatever fantastic materials can spread and do their magic. So to answer a question that you haven't actually asked me yet is, it was like living in a film school and art school in my house. I had a painter mother and a filmmaker father, and we all got involved. And at one stage, he thought there should be extraterrestrials. So my mother and a couple of other artist ladies were set to work creating monsters in clay, and then they were modeled in latex and then painted, so they were all kind of wobbly, and they were going to film them, and it was decided it was really a bad idea. So then these ETs went into our garden and we had all these really weird things sort of waving their arms around in the garden and go, oh, what's that? ETs that didn't go into 2001, which is a good thing, which is a very good thing.
Grazie. La mia esperienza con l'artigianato di lusso di Kubrick è, diciamo, l'illuminazione che ho avuto rispetto a questo. Io, non ve l'ho detto, ho realizzato nel 99, ho conosciuto Katharina e l'ho intervistata nel 99 a Chidbury, St. Albans, nord di Londra, a casa loro, alla famosa casa di Stanley Kubrick, quando era ancora nell'immaginario collettivo, era ancora casa di Stanley Kubrick. Ma esiste la casa e Kubrick? Perché vi assicuro, noi all'epoca nel 97 facemmo delle interviste, Katharina non lo sa, a St. Albans, erano le prime interviste di assaggio del documentario Stanley and Us, e abbiamo chiesto a un centinaio di persone di St. Albans se avevano mai visto Stanley Kubrick, e uno ha detto, ah sì, è un giardiniere della mia vicina, e l'altro ha detto, oh, it's Santa Claus, mi ha fatto vedere una foto, è Babbo Natale, e altri hanno detto, ah sì sì, come no, regista di E.T. Ok, nessuno di loro, nessuno di loro comunque sapeva che Stanley Kubrick, pur vivendo in una villa da 40 stanze a pochissimi chilometri da St. Albans, abitasse lì. Nessuno. E quindi poi ci siamo rincontrati oggi dopo tanto tempo. Però la mia vera illuminazione sul cinema di Stanley Kubrick è stata quando nel 2001 restaurarono 2001. E in una copia 70 mm, l'ho visto a Roma, e io sapevo di una cosa che mi sembrava un po' una leggenda. Non so se vi ricordate la scena della penna che galleggia nell'aria dopo che, insomma, è uscita dal taschino di Floyd, no? E poi arriva la hostess con le scarpe magnetiche, e piano piano la prende e la rimette nel taschino di Floyd. E mi sono detto, ma allora oggi questa cosa si fa con un 2 giga di RAM e un computer che costa 100 euro. All'epoca non c'era né la RAM, sì, c'era, insomma, c'era soltanto, era possibile fare, diciamo, tra le tante cose, effetti ottici semmai, ma il problema è, se quello è un effetto ottico, cioè se la penna è stata messa dopo a galleggiare, come fa però la hostess a prenderla? Quindi quella penna era davvero sul set e galleggiava sul set. Allora ho detto, fili? Però sapevo di questa leggenda e mi sono accorto che questa leggenda in realtà è la vera, perché vedendo il film ad altissima risoluzione, restaurato a 70 mm, come voi sapete, Stanley adorava quando i suoi film erano restaurati. Quando fu restaurato per esempio Orizzonti di Gloria, so che era stato molto felice. Però quindi tu vedi i suoi film nella massima condizione possibile, migliore possibile, però vedi anche i difetti. E io mi resi conto che quello che sapevo, che credevo fosse, insomma, era vero, e cioè quella penna era semplicemente attaccata con una ventosa molto piccola, invisibile, su una grande lastra di vetro, che veniva manovrata fuori campo da 2 attrezzisti non inquadrati, che facendo fluttuare questa lastra di vetro facevano fluttuare la penna. Quindi la penna esisteva, la hostess la poteva prendere, tant'è che se vi rivedrete per la 100ª volta 2001 nel Strano Spazio, fate caso a 2 cose. Uno, che quando la hostess prende la penna si capisce che la stacca da un vetro, perché fa stock, il rumore non c'è, però c'è quel momento in cui fa stock. Secondo, il vetro era rigato, e muovendosi e vedendolo a 70 mm si vede la riga che si muove solidalmente con la penna. Ecco, io credo che qui c'è l'essenza della genialità artigianale del cinema di Kubrick. Credo che questa sia veramente uno degli esempi più grandi che si possano fare, perché appunto questo, no, in qualche modo chiude il cerchio col fatto. Antonio Margheriti, che fu chiamato da Stanley, dice sempre che lui faceva i film in 2 settimane e un giorno, il giorno lo usava per gli effetti speciali, e quando E quando non sapeva con i suoi collaboratori come fare un effetto, diceva sempre, lo risolveva sempre dicendo, vabbè, famo una specchiata, cioè usiamo uno specchio. Ecco, Kubrick è il maestro del famo una specchiata. Non è un modo per diminuirlo, semmai il contrario, è un modo per sottolinearle la grandiosità. Tu lo sapevi questa cosa del vetro, Katharina? C'eri per caso lì? Della penna? E scusami, e se la risposta fosse no, ti ricordi un aneddoto del genere, magari anche di qualche altro film? Perché Katharina ha lavorato anche per Barry Lyndon, Full Metal Jacket, Shining, Eyes Wide Shut.
Well, you've ruined it for me now. I thought it was floating.
Perché eri piccola?
That's, I mean, you know, it was magic. You've ruined it.
Sorry.
I actually think it's a shame that people get to see how movies are made now, because it is magic. It is this. I love the smell of walking onto a soundstage in a studio. It's like Chanel to me, because so much magic happens in those places, and movie making is, I think, the ultimate form of making dreams while you're awake. And there's such power there. And no, I wasn't on the set when they did that. But there was no other way to do it. How could you do it? With a piece of string like a marionette? I don't think so. And I'm sure there was a lot of glass cleaner used on that piece of glass. So, but I was 14 when the film came out. And so it was sort of, you know, from 10 to 14, and we went onto the set, and I walked on the centrifuge, and we visited the art department, and we played with the chimpanzees, and, you know, after school, and we went and we had a good time because this was Daddy's job, and this is what we did. So we saw a lot of stuff, and it's like going into any really busy working studio. There's a lot of people doing lots of different things, and whether it's at home or at the film studio, there were a lot of people very busy, each in their own department. So I don't have any specific anecdotes for you. It was just my life at the time.
Ok, allora io ovviamente ho circa altre 10.000 domande, ma nel frattempo che le faccio, se c'è qualcuno di voi che vuole fare delle domande, alzate la mano e... ok? Ci parli un attimo a proposito di Eyes Wide Shut e del quadro che c'è lì, perché quello fa parte, cioè la pittura è una parte molto importante della tua vita, ma come anche è una parte molto importante della vita di Christiane. Ci racconti un attimo da questo punto di vista la tua esperienza su Eyes Wide Shut?
Well, so the painting came about because it was going to be Stanley's 60th birthday. And, you know, what do you give Stanley Kubrick for his birthday? I mean, it's almost impossible. And we had a lot of cats and a lot of dogs, and there was one cat called Polly who was his favorite, and he was her favorite human, so I thought I'll do a big painting, and I gave it to him for his birthday. And he was 60, and he unwrapped it, and he was, you know, he really loved it. And he said, I don't feel 60, I feel like I'm 35. And I was in my 30s then, and I didn't really understand that feeling. But now that I'm going to be 65 any minute, I realize what he was talking about. So it was very nice that he put that painting so prominently on the set, and I thought it was like a really big thank you. And I didn't know that he'd done that. I mean, my mother and I sent all our paintings and all the furniture and the chairs and the vases, and when I see Eyes Wide Shut, I go, oh, there's the thing. Oh, okay, all right. So we had nothing to sit on. And the reason he did that was because he couldn't it was a New York set, a New York apartment. He didn't know how to decorate it. He didn't want a designer to come and do it. He wanted it to be real. So he was looking around our house and go, well, to my mum, he said, well, we have nice stuff. Let's just put our stuff in there and then it will be a New York apartment. So that's what happened. And what was the rest of the question?
You answered.
Did I?
Yeah. In Eyes Wide Shut tu hai fatto anche una parte come attrice. Ok, diciamo una parte come attrice.
Yeah. Okay, so like I said, we were a family circus, and I have 3 sons, and I came to visit my parents with my son, who had had a horrible cycling accident. So he had gone on the road and he had scabs all down his body. It was horrible. And we went to visit and he was in pain, and Stanley took one look at him and, oh my God, you'd make a great patient for Dr. Bill. But by the time that sequence came to be filmed, my son was all healed and better. But of course he'd promised it. So Alex went to school, I picked him up from school, then we went to the studios, and then it became a gland thing because he was looking forward to it. So that's how that happened. And I was in Barry Lyndon as well. So when I wasn't looking for locations, I got to go put costume on and go and dance in the field. And in the scene where Redmond throws the glass of wine at Captain Quinn, where all the daughters at the table, and then we go rushing out in shock. And my younger sister Vivian was the little girl on the phone in 2001. So yeah, involved.
Tutto questo è anche per dire una cosa che secondo me è molto importante. Se voi conoscete la storia dei collaboratori, delle collaborazioni, dei collaboratori dei film di Kubrick, per le colonne sonore, per la sceneggiatura soprattutto, saprete che a un certo punto della sua carriera Stanley Kubrick decide di non avvalersi più, per esempio, di autori di colonne sonore per il cinema, ma di musicisti, o di prendere musica, brani non originali. La stessa cosa accade per quanto riguarda la scrittura dei suoi film, cioè a un certo punto Stanley decide che gli sceneggiatori non andavano bene e si circondava di scrittori. Diane Johnson, per esempio, per quanto riguarda Shining, ma è solo un esempio. Questo credo che sia proprio, ecco, no? Per esempio quando Katharina diceva prima non voglio un designer, qualcuno che faccia il design di un appartamento newyorkese, voglio che sia appunto, come dire, costruito, come dire, non da un professionista del cinema, ma da qualcuno che mi possa restituire ciò che penso o che possa rispondere alle domande alle cui non ho risposta. Credo che questo, no, che sia proprio una delle caratteristiche proprio del cinema di Stanley. Ci racconti per esempio anche come andò la tua esperienza sul set di, che qui ci sarebbe un mondo da aprire, sul set di Shining. Tu ti sei occupata anche dell'art department, hai cercato dei props per il film, ma anche delle location. Per esempio mi viene in mente, cosa ti viene in mente se ti dico la parola Anchorage?
Okay, Anchorage. They've just had a really bad earthquake, actually, so they're not in good shape. On The Shining, I was sent to America to look for props for the hotel with an Indian theme, so I was looking for rugs, and then I went to this museum where there were these American tribal rugs and realized that this was art, and these were, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there was no way that these museums would lend these valuable works. So Stanley was all upset and he said, okay, well, we'll have to copy them. Then I went to Los Angeles and bought some props for American products for the inside of the hotel, so food and toothpaste and things that you have in your house. And from there I went to Anchorage because I was supposed to set up the second unit location for when Halloran has had The Shining and he's going back to rescue Danny. Have you seen this? Have you seen The Shining? Yes? Yes? Okay. So the scene where he gets the snowcat and he goes to the garage. So I was sent to Anchorage, and I got there the day after Christmas. And so I was supposed to shoot the airport, but I was in Alaska, and they literally didn't have any snow for about 3 weeks. And every day I was on the phone to the weather people and said, no snow's coming. And meantime, the production office was sending me film to store in the refrigerator at the hotel to get ready for the second unit. But in the event, they just said, look, we're not getting the weather here. So I measured and took photographs of an existing petrol garage in Anchorage, and I took photographs, came back home, and then they reproduced that as a set at the studios. So that's what I did there. Nice place, Anchorage, by the way. Yeah.
Ok. C'è per caso nel frattempo qualche domanda? Se no vado avanti io. Ah, prego. Ce n'era un'altra? Scusate, alzate un attimo. 1 e 2. Ok. Prima, vabbè, come volete.
Buongiorno.
Scusami, allora scusate, mi fido di voi, ma domande brevi e non trattati di cinema.
Okay. Buongiorno. Qualche anno fa fu realizzato in Italia un documentario chiamato S for Stanley, che è un documentario dedicato a suo padre, ma soprattutto al rapporto con Emilio D'Alessandro, il suo autista tuttofare. Le volevo chiedere che ricordi ha di Emilio e se ha visto il documentario, gli è piaciuto, insomma, che ricordi ha di Emilio. Grazie.
Emilio started off as a taxi driver in the village where we lived, and Stanley was looking for a driver and met Emilio and liked him. And Emilio was in our lives for 30 years, and he did a lot. He drove Stanley, he drove my mother, he picked me up from the hospital if I had, to go. He fed the cats. He did. He fed the cat. Stanley would say, go to St. Albans and buy me 10 pairs of socks. So he was a sort of a general factotum, and he was very sweet, very nice. And he had actually retired when Stanley died, and he came back to England because he wanted to walk with the coffin. So when we were burying Dad, we had Tom Cruise and my nephews, not my cousins, and my then husband and Emilio, and we walked the coffin from the house to the grave because Dad's buried in the garden at home. But he was a lovely, lovely, sweet man. Yeah.
Siccome io ho il sospetto che ne so un po' più di lei di Emilio, perché lo conosco bene, l'ho frequentato per un anno, eravamo molto amici. Ho dormito tante volte a casa sua, mi ha fatto indossare il cappello del sergente Hartman, che ha Emilio, mi ha fatto indossare la giacca amaranto di Jack Torrance, e qualche mese fa ho scoperto che l'hanno venduta per 35.000 euro e io me la potevo rubare quel giorno e non l'ho fatto. Mi ha fatto fare colazione su uno dei tavolinetti di Barry Lyndon che si trovava sopra uno dei tappeti di Shining. E so che Emilio a casa sua, tutto questo a casa sua a Cassino, perché Emilio è un contadino, era un contadino di Cassino, che come sapete è a sud di Roma.
Such an ugly carpet, oh my God.
Yeah. To have
It's
in a house.
really
Yeah,
ugly.
Absolutely. Emilio aveva, per esempio, per farvi capire quanto era importante la figura di Emilio per Stanley, era l'unico che aveva le chiavi, almeno questo mi ha detto Emilio, del suo ufficio privato, dell'ufficio privato di Stanley. E poi, per esempio, infatti qui poi volevo chiederti un'altra cosa che riguarda Barry Lyndon, il tuo lavoro di location manager, anche per Barry Lyndon. Mi diceva che durante le riprese di Barry Lyndon Emilio si è comportato anche da agente segreto, cioè siccome si girava una gran parte del film in Irlanda, come sapete, quando a fine giornata il girato, cioè i giornalieri, venivano spediti venivano spediti a Londra per lo sviluppo, nel laboratorio di sviluppo, E Stanley non si fidava del corriere che portava il girato, che era costato tanti soldi e tanta fatica, e mandava Emilio di nascosto a seguire il corriere in aereo per assicurarsi che il corriere che portava le pizze di pellicola dall'Irlanda a Londra le portasse davvero, che non ci fossero problemi. Insomma, ecco, Emilio era un personaggio straordinario da questo punto di vista. Quindi volevo chiederti, tu sei stata sì, no, eri anche piccola, ma insomma sul set di Barry Lyndon, sia in Irlanda che in Inghilterra. C'è qualcosa che ci vuoi raccontare di quella tua esperienza?
Well, yeah, Barry Lyndon took quite a long time to film, and as I said, we started in Ireland, and but then when the film production moved to Dublin, in those days the IRA were a big problem, and Stanley, we as a family were threatened by the IRA. I mean, so Stanley thought, okay, well, it's just a movie and I don't want to die. So we moved, I was already home. And the whole film production moved from Ireland back to England. Then they set up production offices in Salisbury. And the whole location searching started again. And then I had gone back to college, actually. And I went down to visit. And I thought, this is so much more fun than art school. I think I'm going to stay. And so I was put to work again, looking for locations. So I traveled literally from the top of the UK to the bottom and side to side, and I was photographing dirt tracks and castles and houses and all sorts of strange things. And I mean, it's such fun doing it. And then, so we were on the set, and if I wasn't doing anything, you could hang around and just watch. And it was a big production, and sometimes there was one actor who, I won't say who, got very drunk, and then the second assistant had to stay up with him till 4 o'clock in the morning trying to drag him out of the bar and say, come on, you have a big scene tomorrow. And then the next day, like 2 hours later, he's in makeup, absolutely drunk out of his head. And it wasted the whole day because everybody's standing around. He couldn't say his lines. He was in costume and he's slurring. So that was not a good day. So when people say, oh, Stanley took so many takes, it was, well, sometimes the actors were drunk. Really, they were drunk, or they'd been out partying all night, or they didn't remember their lines. And Stanley was saying, look, this is your job. You're the actor. One of the things you have to know is your lines. If you don't know your lines, he said, you can look in an actor's eyes and you can see if they're remembering. Because when we remember, we look up and we go, oh, and you have to know your lines like you know your name. Otherwise, you don't know them. So if you're hungover and you look like shit because you've had 3 hours sleep and you don't know your lines, and then somebody says, "Oh, you made me take 40 takes." People don't hear that bit. They only hear that, "Oh, he was such a hard taskmaster." But I'm not going to tell you who it was.
Ok.
Allora, intanto grazie di questo tempo trascorso a parlare di una figura così importante per noi, che ha plasmato il nostro immaginario. Personalmente lo ritengo una delle figure che ha più influenzato la mia crescita e la mia visione del cinema. In questo senso la domanda che vorrei fare, proprio anche molto breve, è in qualità di figlia, quando un genitore scompare, come dire, emergono tante domande, tanti aspetti su cui si vorrebbe in qualche modo approfondire quello che magari si è lasciato da parte nel momento invece della vita vissuta. Ecco, vorrei chiedere se potesse fare una domanda o approfondire un aspetto della vita di Stanley, quale domanda farebbe oggi? Che cosa le piacerebbe sapere che magari non è così chiaro del suo percorso?
What would I ask him now? About what? About what film he wanted to make next, or anything? Well, he didn't really like taking holidays, and he didn't. I think I would have liked if he would have that we as a family would have traveled a bit more, but he didn't like flying, you know. So it was a bit of a problem, but. He was kind of who he was. There's nothing I would have asked him really, because he was a full-time dad, he was a full-time husband, he was a pretty good grandfather. He had organized his life in such a way that he could work at home and have his family with him. So when he died and all these really terrible stories were coming out, and that he was a misogynist and an egoist and a maniac and reclusive and obsessive and all these things, this, for a grieving family, is incredibly upsetting, because, you know, I would read these things in the newspaper and I go, who are they talking about? Who is this fictitious character that they've made up? Because somehow they want somebody who they see as a genius to also not be a human being. They want them to be different in some way. And, you know, and I would be so angry with journalists. I say, excuse me, you're talking about my father here. Just shut up. So it's very important for me to redress the balance. I think over the last 20 years we've managed to say, look, you know, yes, he made wonderful films. Yes, he was very unique in a lot of ways. Yes, he inspired hundreds of filmmakers and film students, and he gave them freedom. But he was also, you know, a loving husband, a loving father, and a loving grandfather. And that is very important to me, that people realize that. And he was very generous of his time, and he was very concerned about the people who worked for him, and if they were sick, or if they had, you know, any medical problems, or they had any. He was a mensch, you know. He wanted to help. He was there for people. He was there for the people that he loved and he trusted. And I think that, you know, I don't really have any questions that I would ask him, because he was kind of perfect the way he was.
Ci sono altre domande, anche perché le vostre sono più interessanti delle mie, sto vedendo. Their questions are more interesting than mine. Please. Okay, well.
No, passando invece al Kubrick regista, io mi sono quasi commosso adesso a sentire questa cosa sul padre e nonno. Che tipo invece di cinema farebbe oggi Stanley Kubrick? Una delle domande che io mi faccio, più vedo i suoi film, appunto, è, visto che è un regista che ha plasmato l'immaginario non solo dello spettatore ma anche di tanti registi oggi, qual è il cinema che farebbe lui, insomma, se è in grado di rispondere o se vuole rispondere?
Oh, really? No. Oh, he asked you if you... What kind of cinema would Stanley do today if he was alive?
I think he would totally get CGI. I think he would fly with it. One of the reasons he didn't do AI at the time was there were various techniques where the CGI wasn't up to speed yet. It wasn't ready for Stanley, with water and fur, because the teddy bear was going to be maybe animated, maybe real. The little boy was maybe going to be animated, maybe real. And I think today's politics would probably have him very depressed. I don't know what subject matter he would have made. And he did say he never knew what kind of film he was going to make next. He had to find a story. And he was very frustrated that he didn't make more films, but he had to fall in love with the story and to have complete faith in it, because otherwise that's such a long process. There's so much money involved in making a film that if you're not 100% sure that, you know, if there's anything that you think isn't going to work, and then people would say to him, why did you why did you fall in love with this story? And he said, I don't know. It's why do you fall in love with your partner? It's undefinable. And it's just something that you feel. And you have to be, I think with any art, you have to be very honest with yourself that you're doing it as well as you can. Does that answer your question? Ish? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Qualcun altro? Ok. Ok. Come è andata la faccenda? Cioè, come... Do you hear me? Really? Yeah, okay. So,
It's okay.
Can
This is
you
going to be
us?
in English anyway.
Okay.
I was wondering actually if you could tell me which of his films is your favorite and why.
Say that again?
Of his films, which is your favorite and why?
That's so unfair.
I know.
You can't...
Please try.
You can't ask me that question. Okay, so they all represent my life. They're all a part of my life. I think right now you should watch Dr. Strangelove every day, and all the politicians in the world should watch Dr. Strangelove every day, because it's almost like a mockumentary now. It's more relevant than ever, I think. I have a great fondness for Eyes Wide Shut because I know the emotion that went into it, and the enormous amount of work that went into it, and how powerful it is as a film. I know when it first came out, you know, half the people didn't like it, half the people loved it. I don't think it was sold very well. But I know that he was incredibly proud of it, and he thought it was his best film. I have great fondness for Barry Lyndon because I worked on it for such a long time. I met the man who was going to be my husband, father of my children, and so each film has its space in my heart. So I can't really be objective about it. Is that fair?
Vai.
Ho capito che non parleremo del film sulla Luna, quindi di Neil Armstrong e altro.
Ne volevo parlare.
Ah, ne volevi parlare, va bene. No, per come lei forse sul set non è stata, però insomma non ha conosciuto Neil Armstrong. Però. No, invece volevo chiedere una cosa molto più semplice riguardo... Volevo chiedere... Ah, non sente... Vabbè, comunque la domanda è talmente facile che Federico la può tradurre.
Eventually. Let's see if this... I'm so sorry if this wasn't working. Yes.
Ci siamo? No, allora salto la premessa e passo alla domanda. Per chi lavoreresti tu oggi? Cioè, quali sono i registi che oggi ti interessano? Perché sennò sembra quasi che il cinema non esista più dopo Kubrick.
Did you understand?
La faccio più complicata?
Non so se ha sentito. Did you hear? No. With which director would you work with today? Questo lo dici tu.
Okay, I mean, obviously I'd like to work for Christopher Nolan, which would be... And but there are a lot of directors out there. But actually, I was always interested in which production designer I would like to work for. So, you know, I worked for Stuart Craig on a film that I won't tell you about because it was so bad. But I worked for Terry Marsh and on Sphinx. I worked for Jeff Kirkland on Midnight Express. So I always wanted to be with the best production designer. So yeah, but that's a long time ago. I haven't actually worked in the film industry for a long time. I do other things now.
Okay. Prima una piccola cosa, cioè una piccola parentesi. Voi sapete che diversi anni fa un famoso regista francese, non mi ricordo mai il nome, ma molto famoso, di documentari, ha diretto un mockumentary che si chiama The Other Side of the Moon, in cui... Yeah. No, ma Katharina, it's worse than that. Because, in cui intervistando esperti veri della NASA, Christiane Kubrick, Ian Harlan, diverse persone, è un mockumentary, quindi un falso documentario, dichiarato, non c'era nessun intento, anzi l'intento era proprio quello di far capire come si può manipolare qualunque cosa. In questo documentario tutti parlavano del fatto che Stanley avesse diretto il finto allunaggio. E Christiane ricordava i suoi ricordi riguardo a questa cosa, eccetera, eccetera. E, a un certo punto, se non sbaglio, una delle tesi era che il motivo era che era ricattato in qualche modo dalla NASA per questioni che avevano a che vedere con suo fratello. Ecco, Kubrick non aveva un fratello, per esempio. E la cosa interessante è che, è che nei titoli di coda Christiane e gli altri, sapete come si fa sempre, viene messo il backstage e tutti dicono, tipo Christiane mi ricordo che a un certo punto si mette a ridere e fa posso dire ancora di queste stupidaggini, è bellissimo, mi diverto tantissimo, eccetera, eccetera. Ora, il punto però è qual è? Me l'ha fatto scoprire Francesco Bonerba, che come voi sapete insomma, fa la comunicazione di questo festival, non lo sapevo, me l'ha detto ieri. Tu sapevi, Katharina, che adesso su YouTube gira questo documentario, ma a cui hanno tagliato la parte iniziale e la parte finale e viene spacciato come la prova definitiva che non siamo mai stati sulla Luna. Lo sapevi? I told you that it was worse than that. Okay.
I did see it, and I think I saw it when it was on television. It was outrageous. And I think, and we were watching it, and of course what they do is they take footage from other interviews, and you never hear the person asking the question. So she's answering a different question, and then you hear my mother going, oh yes, he was so excited, about doing this job. She's talking about something else. We were jumping up and down. We were so angry. And what's really depressing is how many people believe it. And so sometimes I do actually get asked that question, did Stanley, fake the moon landing, and because he was so, I know, right? So, and because, and I read conspiracy theories that he was murdered in his bed because he knew all these secrets. And and I just say, well, yes, you all know exactly how precise he was because he actually insisted on shooting it on location. So. There we are.
Okay. No,
I mean, how can you answer that question?
No, è importante fare ogni tanto queste operazioni di debunking, cioè ragazzi, per esempio, adesso non so cosa ne pensi invece dell'altro tema, cioè lo stesso tema però, 10 minutes, dello stesso tema però trattato da quel documentario su Shining, Room 237, secondo cui Shining sarebbe pieno di simbologie occulte che racconterebbero per l'ennesima volta questa faccenda. Qualcuno di voi era coinvolto in questo documentario oppure appunto l'avete visto improvvisamente e vi siete resi conto che esisteva? Are
you talking about Room 237? You're talking about that one?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. Because I asked people whose opinion I respect if it's any good, and they say, no, don't watch it because it'll just make you angry. So I said, okay, so I won't watch it. I have read people for instance, with the moon landing, and I say, don't be so silly, and they go, yeah, but he's not going to tell his daughter. Why would he tell his daughter? It's secret. He's not going to tell you. Of course he filmed the moon landing. He just didn't tell you about it. So how do you argue with somebody like that? And then where little Danny is wearing the Apollo 11 jumper in The Shining. And then that apparently is supposed to be some kind of deep, meaningful, nod to 2001 and how, he owed Nassau, and that he was sort of making little sort of hints that somehow or other he was involved in the moon landing. But what happened was Milena Canonero, who was the costume designer, had a friend knit a nice jumper for Danny. That's it. It doesn't get any more complicated than that. And it was American, so, and there was a space race and all of that stuff. So it was...
It's the right answer. Perché non mettiamo... Se avete registrato, la mettiamo questa cosa su YouTube e così combattiamo quell'altro video assurdo. A proposito di Milena Canonero, mi ha raccontato una cosa che non sapevo, il che è molto difficile rispetto a Kubrick. Come è stata ingaggiata Milena per A Clockwork Orange?
Okay,
Sorry, faccio questa domanda perché c'è qui Katharina ci sta facendo capire che il cinema cioè come si fa cinema non è come tutti possono immaginarsi, è molto più complesso, è anche molto più semplice, è anche molto più casuale, è soltanto la capacità di tirare fuori un minimo di ordine dal caos, ma è impossibile che un regista abbia il controllo di tutto. Questo che ci racconterà adesso è un altro esempio. A me viene sempre in mente, non dirò chi è, ma un giornalista chiese un giorno a Carpenter riguardo a Fog, gli chiese: senti, ma John, ma nella scena finale quando si vedono gli zombie nella nebbia, uno degli zombie sei tu John, quindi significa che tu lì avevi un desiderio di fare del metacinema, perché il regista che fa una parte, e John gli disse semplicemente no, non avevo i soldi per gli extras. Questo la trovo una cosa che è assolutamente... That's cinema, baby. That's cinema, baby.
I think actually that movie making is as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. Like anything in life, actually. You can overthink it, or you can not think about it enough. And lots of movies are made, but very few movies last. It's like music or it's like art. And I think that with Milena, that happened because she was the partner of an Italian writer called Riccardo Aragno, who had been collaborating with Stanley on...
Dialogue adaptation.
Yeah, that. And they were friends with Ken Adam and Letizia, who was from Ischia. And so we had these 4 Italians coming to the house, and they said, okay, we come for dinner, but we cook. Okay, so we had these 4 Italians in the kitchen arguing about how to cook the pasta. So we said, okay, you just get on with it, and we just, waited. And Milena was a particularly elegant woman, always beautifully dressed, like most Italians, I think. And Stanley was working on Clockwork Orange, and they were thinking about the costumes for the characters in this sort of quasi-futuristic film. And he just sort of looked at Milena one day and he said, "You're elegant, you know how to dress, you do it, you buy the clothes." And that's how she started. That's it, that's how it started. And she is now a multi-Oscar winning costume designer. And then, of course, she worked on Barry Lyndon as well. And going back to something you said earlier, he didn't want somebody to design 17th and 18th century costumes when you have the paintings right there. You have the designs right there. And he got very, Ken Adam, the production designer on that film, was very upset because he wanted to build sets. You can't build a set that has the atmosphere and the ambiance and the patina of a real old castle. Let's do it for real. I mean, if you're going to film with candles, you can't have a set because it's going to look like shit. So he wanted it to be as real as, and so Milena and Ulla-Britt Söderlund, who he recruited from Scandinavia, and so those two, and they made the costume, and some of the costumes are authentic 18th century costume. The Chevalier's embroidered waistcoat, that's real. That's from the period. And they were hand dyeing silks and embroidering buttons because he didn't want it to look like a TV costume drama. He wanted to have as much of the originality of those beautiful paintings. Because he said himself, he ruined all the best art books. He would just tear out the pages, and my mother's going, no, you can't do that. Anyway, no, this is research. So all the art books about all those paintings, all the costumes, all the interiors were all on the wall in the art department so that they could get it as real as they possibly could. Because why would you go to all that trouble and then have the wrong music or the wrong lighting? So he tried really hard. He cared about his films, and he wanted to give the audience the best experience, and that was the most important thing for him.
Ok, chiudo io con un'ultima domanda per legare un po' tutto quanto, cioè questo incontro con Katharina che deve legare ovviamente il lavoro di Stanley, il lavoro di Katharina, il discorso del noir, il discorso personale e professionale del padre. In Shining, ora io credo che non solo Rapina a mano armata sia un film noir tra i film di Kubrick, ma anche in Shining l'arco del personaggio di Jack Torrance è l'arco di un personaggio noir, cioè un personaggio che non riesce a fare i conti con l'ineluttabilità del suo destino, che è un classico, no? Degli archi narrativi dei personaggi noir degli anni 40 e 50. Qualcuno ha detto, io questo lo chiedo a te perché sono molto incuriosito da questo, secondo te Jack Torrance in qualche modo è stato scritto, certo è un personaggio che deriva dal libro di Stephen King, ma secondo te in qualche modo Stanley si riconosceva in Jack, a parte il fatto che voleva uccidere la moglie e la figlia, insomma, a parte quello, lui si riconosceva in Jack in qualche modo, cioè un artista che fa una fatica enorme a scrivere ed è insomma in qualche modo un personaggio che faceva parte, un po' parte di lui in qualche modo? Non la parte criminale, chiaramente.
No. But I think that, Stanley regretted that he wasn't a writer. And so when he found a book, he was frustrated that he couldn't originate a story. So that's why he was always looking for a story that would really move him. And then in order to work on the script, that he would hire then writers and script writers. I mean, with Lolita, he actually had Nabokov, who was the author himself, work on the script. And so yeah, he found people that he could collaborate with. But even on The Shining, he was working and adapting the script all the time, because if you have a great cast, they bring something to the film also, and they have ideas, and they, make suggestions. And Stanley wasn't one of those people who would say, no, don't talk to me, it's my script, it's my baby. And he said, yeah, let's try it. So he was very free-flowing, so actors liked working with him because they got to bring themselves, and Keir Dullea, who was Captain Bowman in 2001, said that he always felt that he was very well cast. And I think that given that Stanley was working for film studios, that they wanted to make money, that he was very careful with his budget, he had a very small crew, he was very responsible, but they said, look, we need a bankable star. So since Ryan O'Neal was one of the biggest movie stars in Hollywood when they were making Barry Lyndon, and Tom and Nick, you didn't get much bigger than that. So he needed movie stars as his main characters, and then he would use some of his old favorites for the other parts, like Philip Stone and
Murray Melvin.
Mary Melvin, and so there were several actors who was also in, I can't remember his name now because my mind's gone, in Paths of Glory, and he was the bartender in The Shining. So he had several, 3 or 4 different actors that he liked using again and again, but each film they had a different lead because the studios wanted to make money and wanted, because the audience, these days I don't think the audience really cares who the director is. I think they care who's in it. I think the stars now have billing over the title, mostly. So, I don't know, times have changed. But he did cast well, and he was very accommodating to their opinion. It is a team effort. You can't make a film on your own. It is, you have to all work together.
Yeah, I know. Ok. Grazie mille e grazie a Katharina.
Grazie. Thank you. Mrs. Kubrick.